Heads up, Jesus is coming. We heard that message loud and clear in last week's reading also. And how the Apostle Paul had to do some damage control, I would say, because the early Jesus followers interpreted coming soon as immediate soon. That understanding of time led the followers of Jesus to stop attending to their day-to-day responsibilities. We heard it in the epistle today. If you don't work, you're not going to eat. And they simply waited for him to arrive while Paul had to do damage control. In today's reading from Luke, Jesus gave some specific examples of the signs that would precede his second coming. Jesus described how the grand and majestic temple of Jerusalem, which Jews consider to be the figurative footstool of God's presence, would be destroyed in those final days as an example of impermanence of human structures. Jews knew the history behind the fall of the first temple, thanks to the biblical history that's recorded in the book of 2 Kings, and the effort that it took to rebuild the one that was in their neighborhood. Jesus' point was that at the time of his second coming, even that temple, the grand temple of Jerusalem, the holiest site of Judaism, would be destroyed. But not his faithful followers. They would find life eternal in the Spirit of Christ. In Luke's Gospel, Christ said that his second coming was near, and then he said it was not immediate. No wonder why there was confusion. Jesus said, when you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified. For these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately. He also said that while persecution and worldly tragedies were occurring leading to his second coming, that all followers should use the time, I call it the in-between time, to testify, to tell the story of Jesus that they knew. There are two distinct messages that stood out for me in the passage from Luke. First, that we will witness terrible things in the world and not to be terrified by them. Second, he said that in the in-between time of now and the second coming, that we should testify. Tell your story about Jesus. Luke's gospel talks about fear from beginning to end, from the first chapter to the 24th. In chapter 1, the heavenly messenger of the Lord, an angel, came to the priest Zechariah before Jesus was born, scaring the daylights out of him, I imagine. And the angel said, "Do not be afraid." The angel came to announce that his wife Elizabeth, who was barren, Elizabeth, the cousin of Mary, would bear him a son. That son would be John the Baptist. That was chapter 1, Luke. Do not be afraid, Zechariah. In that same first chapter, the archangel Gabriel visited Mary, the betrothed of Joseph, and said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary." As he was about to ask whether she would bear the Son of God into the world. Do not be afraid of having a child out of wedlock and bearing the Son of God? Yeah, right. You thought you had reasons to be terrified by life's curveballs, right? There was Mary. And in the very last chapter of Luke, when Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women went to help anoint the body of Jesus and found an empty tomb, the presence of two men in dazzling clothes, says the gospel, were there, angels that had come to announce that Christ had risen. The women were terrified. Fear. Jesus repeated to his disciples not to be afraid, but how could we not be afraid? Jesus made the concept of fearlessness a matter of faith and also a matter of godliness. Fear, a matter of faith, and also a matter of godliness. He said that not a hair of your head will perish. We're asked to believe without fear because Christ has our back. The second message that stood out for me was to testify. Jesus said that before the end of time, believers would be persecuted, arrested, handed over to the authorities, even killed because of belief and faith in him. And that when captured, they should testify. Testify about what? Testify about their transformation. What Jesus meant by the word, at least my interpretation, was to share your faith journey. Share why you would lie your life down for him. Share how you became aware of your belief, how faith manifests itself in your life. Talk about the good news of that peace of God that passes all understanding, yet you believe. Talk about healing. We've all experienced it. Sustenance, grace, love, compassion, even anxiety, fear. We're living in that in-between time of Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension, and the second coming, which is not now, but now sometime. Jesus said, when you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified. Nations will rise against nation. We're seeing that. There will be great earthquakes, famines, plagues. We're seeing that. He told the disciples to use that in-between time to testify about their faith, their trust, their belief in him. Use the time. You know, I heard Bishop Curry, he's the Bishop of North Carolina, speak at the last General Convention about Christians going crazy as Jesus went over Jesus. And he said, tell the story as if you were crazy for Jesus. And he was hysterical. He had the place on the floor. And I suggest you Google him. Michael Curry, going crazy for Jesus. It's phenomenal. He says going crazy about your love for others, talking about your service, sharing about compassion, solidarity for the defenseless. He said, you know, if you talk about being crazy over chocolate chip cookies and, you know, the latest fad, why not talk about being crazy for Jesus? He's got a good way of doing that. I don't think I could do it the way he does it, but we're not about to do it the way other people do it. It's about how you might take it upon yourself to share that good news. What scares me about testimony is that I don't want to be seen as a religious fanatic. Being crazy for Jesus, people would walk the other way. I get it. And I also get the part that faith is personal for many of us. Yet Christ did not just invite us, but told us to take a risk and to testify. One can never be prepared enough to share one's faith story because Christ's revelation happens randomly in our lives. Every moment, every day, in little bits and pieces, you see the glory of Christ somehow. And then, of course, you never know when the opportunity to testify will present itself. It too is random. So, I'd like to invite any of you who are willing to try sharing a snippet of your faith story to do so during the announcements today. It's risky, it's scary, but it's pre-planned, I'm informing you. Remember this, Jesus said, not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls. So think about it. Try giving it a shot. 30 seconds, not a sermon, a testimony. You can share why you believe, how it started for you, faith. It might not even be here at announcements, it might be outside at coffee hour. It doesn't matter. Something that happened that made you stand in awe of God. Why having a faith community like ours is meaningful to you. How serving other people actually transforms you. What about liturgy captivates you? The liturgy that we presence here. Eloquence is not a requirement, so I invite you to testify. Amen.